This video is a crash course on how to schmooze the right way to actually get the career results you want while I get ready for a girls' night. I'm multifaceted. But if you clicked on this video and you're not an intern, don't click out. This video is truly a step-by-step guide on how I grew my career from 0 to 6 figures. I am going to structure this video like a story time, but I'm gonna have all of my advice woven in and time-stamped below. I actually changed my major a couple of times when I was in university. I won't bore you with that whole saga, but by the time I was in third year, I landed in human resources, which is what I eventually graduated and started working in. Now, all of my internships leading up to me being in third year university weren't in human resources. Most of them were in media, writing. I wrote for magazines, fashion blogging, just random shit. So basically, third year rolls around. I'm desperate for an internship. I really wanted it to be in human resources, and I had no experience, so that was great. One of my HR professors was emphasizing the importance of actually networking in order to get your first relevant internship. Now, I had no one to network with other than family and family friends, so I actually reached out to a couple of my aunts who connected me with one of my aunt's sisters who worked at a large Canadian bank, and she was able to refer me for an internship position. Now, to be clear, I very much still had to go through the full interview process. I had to be qualified for the job. I did, in fact, get that internship position. I was working as an instructional design intern. Sits in learning and development in human resources. So you basically work with a bunch of different teams at the bank to understand what some of their team's challenges are, and then you build learning and development programs to help with those challenges. Truly, the people I was working with were absolutely incredible, but although I really enjoyed working with them, I knew for a fact I did not have the skills or the desire, to be honest, to work in learning. And I didn't really have anyone to teach me this, but I just innately knew that I had to maximize this corporate experience in order to set me up for a full-time job when I graduated the following year. And I was watching a lot of my peers just do their job and go home and not really invest in building relationships, and I remember looking at them a couple of weeks into my internship being like, no, I'm gonna outsmart you. Everything I'm about to share, you can do at any stage in your career. You do not need to be an intern for this to be relevant. You can do this when you are full-time, looking for a promotion, looking to grow your network, anything. I paid very close attention to who was clearly well-respected at the company, and you can tell who's well-respected because people speak really highly of them, people want them on their projects, and you can kind of tell who people low-key hate because they avoid them and avoid working with them. So I identified who those key players were, like who were the important people, and I paid attention to how they worked. What kind of language did they use? Were they more formal? Were they more casual? What were some of the technical skills that they had? And what were some of the things they did that made people enjoy working with them? Once I figured out who the key players were, I made a point to book one-on-one time with them. Now, what I see a lot of people do, which to be honest is a massive mistake, is they book these one-on-one chats with prominent people at a company, thinking it's going to get them ahead. But that's not how things work. You actually need to prepare and be ready to stunt on these bitches in this conversation. Because if you go into these networking chats thinking things are just gonna fall in your lap, mama, your lap's gonna be empty forever. So I would prepare for these conversations literally like they were an interview. I would follow a very specific interview rubric that ended up helping me out so much. That is specifically what landed me my first full-time job before I even graduated. I started off by thanking them for their time and stating my intention for the conversation. And I always made sure my intention was to learn more about them and their career journey because I really respected their career. They would typically say thank you. I would ask to hear a bit about how they got into this industry and their career journey. They would talk me through what they did in school, how they got to this role, and then I would have 3 really targeted questions prepared for them. The questions that people enjoyed receiving the most was me saying, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've noticed in this role? What were some of the things you wish you learned earlier in your career? How did you manage transitioning from this position to this position? And what advice would you give me as someone who's looking to grow my career at this company? And all of the advice was genuinely so helpful. I wasn't just asking these questions for the sake of asking them. I actually listened to what they said and implemented it. I listened to the advice that they gave and I actually took it. And the reason I was able to get ahead in my career overall is because when people gave me tips and tricks and advice, I actually took it to heart and used that feedback and used those ideas as a gift to take me to the next level. But the real kicker, like the real kicker here is at the end of every single career conversation that I had, I asked the person, is there anyone else at this company or in your network you think I would benefit from speaking with? Hey, I was 19 and I was on game. Like, that's crazy. So I would basically say, hey, tap me into your network. I want to meet more people. I want to meet more people who want to see me succeed. If you're an intern, you should be averaging at least 2 career conversations every week because you have finite time. If you're at any other stage in your career, myself included, Try to have one every 2 weeks, because trust me, these are the connections that are going to help you take your career to the next level. I have to put my hair up, but think of this even in the context of the job market we're currently operating in. We already know that almost 80% of jobs are filled by way of referrals. But in today's job market, where it is literally so competitive, it almost feels impossible for someone to even open your resume. What do you think is gonna help you stand out? It's someone who works at that company already saying, oh, I had an incredible conversation with Emily. She was so thoughtful and so insightful and really well prepared. Yeah, suddenly you're not just a resume, you're someone that is a real person that someone is vouching for. That is career changing. So as I went through all of these conversations, I ended up speaking with folks across a variety of different teams, and I very quickly learned the teams I thought were interesting and the teams that, just weren't for me. Nothing wrong with them. It's just not work I was particularly interested in. And the value of these conversations is the stuff I thought I wanted to do, compensation, employment law. I spoke with people who did that work and I was like, I don't want to do this. This sounds fucking awful. So eventually I ended up having a career conversation booked with the director of campus recruitment. Campus recruitment is basically a really interesting and unique area of HR. It's recruitment specifically for interns. And they were hiring for a contract recruitment coordinator. So basically scheduling all of the interviews. The only catch was they needed me to start at the end of the summer. But remember, I was going back to school. Now, one thing about me, I'm crazy. I've always been very career driven. I've always wanted, to come out on top, so to speak. I'm very competitive when it comes to my career. And I saw that opportunity arise and I said, oh, I'm taking it. I'm gonna figure it out. Next piece of advice, don't worry about the first job you take out of school or the first job you take in a new career path. Don't worry about it being perfect. You need to just take the job, get the experience, and you can always, always, always pivot later. Immediately after meeting with the director of campus recruitment, I called my university to see if I could transition the rest of my courses online, and I could. So I ended up working full-time, like a full-time job, in office 5 days a week at one of the largest banks in Canada while I was finishing my degree. And I don't say that to flex, but I do say that to prove that that method of networking literally works, especially if you're trying to grow at a company, whether you are an intern or even if you're more senior in your career. That strategic networking, asking to be connected and saying yes to opportunities that scare you, that's really the secret. Another reason I'm pretty sure they ended up moving forward with me for that full-time role is because I got really good at playing the office politics. Now I've got several full videos breaking down how to navigate office politics, especially as a young person. So check out the rest of the videos on this channel if you feel like you need a little crash course in that. And if I could rapid fire some other tips and things that I know helped me during that phase of my life, is I never socialized to people that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. Instead of saying, oh, I don't know what I want for my future, I would focus on what I did want. I would say, I love this company. I want to grow with this company. I want to work in HR. And right now I'm exploring what's the best fit for me. I would never use language like, oh, I don't know, or whoever will take me. I never acted desperate when it came to my career. I just acted like I was open to exploring and using this as one of my many options. And if you are not new here, you know I talk a lot about not using self-deprecating language, especially at work. And that's something that I really stood on business with, because even as an intern, I was not diminishing my work. I wasn't downplaying myself. I wasn't pretending that the work I did wasn't valuable. I spoke about myself like I meant something. That kind of crazy competitive edge I had, where I believed and knew I was going to be special even before I had evidence that I was special, is exactly why I got ahead in my career. I paid attention to what the skills gaps were at the company. At the time at the bank, it was social media and graphic design. These people could not design a pretty slide. And it's no one's fault. They just didn't have anyone on the team who could do that. These people did not have Twitter savvy, because at the time Twitter was really big in recruitment marketing. And I knew how to do that stuff. And I didn't know how to do it well, but I just went on YouTube and I taught myself. And one day I sat down with my boss and I said, how would you feel if I started doing our social posts? Because I've noticed we've got an opportunity here. And do you want to know what my boss said? Yeah, go for it. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but I figured it out. I Googled things and I used my tenacity to my advantage. If you are trying to grow at a company, intern or otherwise, God, my skin looks good today. Pay attention to what the gaps are, find a way to fill it. And there is always a gap. Maybe it's documentation, process. Maybe your team doesn't have a great sense of morale. Maybe there's like toxicity, a lack of socialization. Find the gap and then make yourself the fix. Do you wanna know why? It's very hard to fire someone who serves multiple purposes, right? But when it's time for promotions, who do you think's getting promoted? The person who does their job well, or the person who does their job well and does a little bit extra? It's also the person who's the most likable. So I started going to all of the team's socials. I would network with people on my team and off my team. And before you know it, especially at this big Canadian bank, I had other teams knocking on my door. Emily, would you want to work on our projects? Emily, I've actually opening up a position. Would you want to move to this role? And that's how I ended up moving from a recruitment coordinator role on like the internship team to the capital markets recruitment coordinator team, where I did in fact get a little pay bump. And the reason people knew I was good at my job is because I socialized it. So I continued to keep track of all of my wins, and I made a concerted effort to talk to my boss about them specifically. So every time I'd have a one-on-one meeting with my boss, I would say, hey, I just wanted to give you a status update. Here's the project results. They went really well. The team was happy. Whenever I get compliments, I would send it to my boss. So then I was always put up for promotions. It was easy for me to ask for a raise. And when other opportunities at the company popped up, people thought of me. It's at that point that I applied for a job at Intuit, although I told my employer they poached me, but whatever. And I say Intuit's name because it is so obvious that I worked there. I talk about them all the time. An incredible, incredible company. I was a junior recruiter at the bank, and the job I was interviewing for at Intuit was a senior recruiter. So that was 2 steps above. I was grossly underqualified for this job. Next tip, I talked about the work I did like I fucking built Noah's Ark with my 2 hands. I didn't lie. I always was honest about my outputs, my inputs, everything that I did, but I spoke about the work I did like it meant something. I didn't downgrade myself because I was a 24-year-old kid. I spoke about myself like a boss-ass bitch. Long story short, they extended an offer to me. And I'm gonna keep it real, I've actually never shared this online. They tried to lowball me. So they interviewed me for this senior recruiter position. And then after my interview, they were like, listen, you have way less experience than a senior recruiter. Can we downgrade you to what they called like the level below, which was just a recruiter level 2? And I said no. And I should have said yes, because that was still a step above where I was. But I said no because I said you interviewed me for the senior recruiter position. You knew how much experience I had going into the interview. It's either you say no to me for this job and we part ways, but you will not be downgrading this position. In retrospect, that was fucking nuts. But you wanna know what they did? They told me that I had so much confidence in myself that they had confidence in me too. Knowing when to leave is the reason I was able to maximize my earnings, because I knew tech is where the money was. I had, I think, 3 different positions over the course of my 4.5-year career there. I followed that same formula. I got good at my job, I got good at a little extra, and I made sure I was highly liked and highly visible. So I made a point to be working on projects that I knew senior leaders would see, and I made a point to, once again, I talked about myself like I already had it. I was never cocky, but you would never catch me speaking ill of myself. I just tried to do my mascara and eyebrows on camera. Unusable footage. Whether you're an intern or more senior in your career, I hope the advice in this video was helpful. If you want to get ahead in your career, you ultimately have to be a little bit crazy. You need to actively share your wins with the people that matter. You need to network internally and get those people to connect you to their network. Because I'm telling you, if you are serious about getting a job at the company you currently work at, that is the secret, that is the trick. That's how you know about jobs that haven't been posted yet. That's how you figure out what teams you do and don't want to work on. You need to become an expert at what you do and an expert at just 10% more of that too. And above all, you need to act like you deserve this shit. I truly hope that this video was helpful. If you have any questions, things you want some advice on, hit me up in the comments. You know I am very good at responding to those. And if there's anything you want me to cover in my next video, just let me know, because one thing about me, I really feel like my purpose on this earth is to help y'all get paid and feel good about the work that you do without stressing as much as I did, because that was so unnecessary. But this is the finished look. Okay, now everyone comment, thanks internet big sister.